I seem to be a magnet for creeps and weirdos, and since I got such a positive response on my last experience, I figured I'd share a few more with you all. I'll be writing in order of let's not meetness, so scroll to the end if you only want the scariest. For some background, these all took place outside my home at the time, which was on the literal last block of a major city right across the street from the beach. The building was framed on four sides by the beach, the woods, the construction site, and a few other sleepy houses, as well as a muni line. Think the subway, but above ground. It's the very last stop on the muni, so unless you catch it at the right time of day or at the height of tourist season, the area is basically empty on the sidewalks. The house itself has an initial patio door, which doesn't always fully close up if you don't slam it, and then an entry area, with a staircase and leading up to a second locked door that leads to the apartment. I get home from work one day at about 9 p.m. and immediately get into a small spat with my roommates. After about 30 minutes, I decide to leave the house to cool off. I had planned on sitting on the porch outside, but as I looked across the street at the ocean, I decided it would be more peaceful there. I had never been to the beach at night for safety reasons, but as I looked at the well-lit parking lot and no one in sight, I decided it would be alright. In the 1 block span from the beach to my home, there was a little wooded path that started on my street and dumped you out at the crosswalk for the beach. It also intersected with another pathway that took you down the coast. I sat for a bit, everything was fine, and after a while I started the 1 minute walk back on the little path. All of a sudden I look up and see a man walking briskly on the intersecting path, looking right at me. Speed up a bit and try to ignore him, and as we hit the section where the two paths intersect, I end up being about a foot away from him. He calls out to me, "Hey, I want to talk to you." I ignore him, and after a few more steps he reaches out his hand and grabs part of my hair, saying, "Hey, come here." I immediately yank my hair out of his hand and book it the last block, sprinting to my house, and I can hear him running behind me. I turn the corner sharply and am briefly out of his sight. Luckily, the initial entryway to the patio had been left open by accident, and I run in through the door and slam it shut. I hear his footsteps stop outside, followed by silence. As I go upstairs and look through our front window, I see him walking away into the construction site. I had a friend that lived a couple blocks from where I was, along the same stretch of beach. After hanging out one day, I decided to head back home around sunset. I've walked this route many times and it's just barely light outside still. Only a 5 minute walk, so I figure I'll be home before dark. As I cross the intersection from their house, I notice a white van parked on the corner that is not usually there. It was covering a little garden I like to look at on my way back. I can just barely make out two people in the front seat. I think, odd, okay, whatever, and pull out my pepper spray. I cross the street, passing the van, and now have my back to it. As soon as my foot hits the pavement on the other side of the street, I hear the van start up. I turn my head just slightly and see them illegally turning onto the street where I'm now walking. They creep the van beside me slowly, just behind me but within my peripheral vision. I decide to stop and let them pass. I pause and pretend to be looking at my phone and see them stop driving immediately. This was a nope for me and I broke into a run, the van following right behind me, to a small vintage motel about 1 building away that I know has an open entrance courtyard. And so as I approach it, I turn quickly into the yard and run up to an archway entry for a unit. I stop at the first few steps, catching my breath, and I open my phone front camera to use as a sort of mirror to see what the van was doing. They backed up to the entry of the motel and sat there for a few minutes. Then, the one on the passenger side opened the door and started walking towards the motel. His phone flashlight was on, and I immediately pulled my own phone back, listening for his footsteps and readying myself to start banging on the motel door, hoping someone is inside. I wait in the silence for a long time, long enough for it to get dark. I finally look out again, and both the man and the van are gone. I call an Uber to take me the last 2 blocks. I never saw them again after that. I have a friend over and we want to smoke weed. It's about 10 p.m. and my roommates don't like smoking weed in the house because of the smell, so he and I go to his car parked out front. We're in there having a good time when I notice a man walking down the block, pulling on car door handles. I notify him and we watch as that same person comes up to his car and yanks on his back door. He honks his horn and they back up for a minute, then walk up to his driver window and knock on the window, making a motion to roll it down. Just as I'm about to tell him don't, he rolls down the window a bit. The person is clean and normally clothed and asks what day it is, and then what time it is, to which my friend answers. They then stand there and stare at us as he tries to usher them away, even offering them money. Without saying anything, they walk away down the block, and once they reach the intersection between the construction site and woods, they roll their head back up to the sky and just start screaming at the top of their lungs. As they back away out of sight, I take this opportunity to dart back inside my house as my friend watches, making sure to close the patio door. A few hours later, one of my roommates comes home very drunk, and as we figured later, they failed to make sure the patio door shut all the way. Morning time comes and I wake up in an empty apartment. I open my phone and have a singular message from my roommate from 3 hours ago, stating that when they left for work this morning, there was a person they didn't know sleeping inside the patio area. They thought it was a drunk person who lived in the neighborhood and entered the wrong house by mistake, and evidently did not find it enough of a reason to call me or wake me up. I immediately go to the entry of our apartment, pulling the door open fast. To my surprise, the person who'd been talking to us in the car the night before is laying casually across my staircase, fiddling with something, and they immediately hop up and run out my patio door. I run down the stairs after them and open the door. They're standing across the street, just smiling at me and giggling. They then give me a little wave and run off. I close the door hard and go back up the steps to see what items they'd left. Sitting on the steps was a few coins, some weird wire-type objects, a lighter, and a pocket knife. I never saw them again. Unrelated to my stories, but shortly after I moved from that area, I heard of news of a teenage girl that was abducted from that same corner where I saw the van, and after a car chase, police also found a severed head in the freezer of a house along my block as well. I also got a lot of questions regarding calling 911 on my last post and wanted to clarify. I'm from a rural area and have had many bad experiences with cops abusing power and have been raised to always be wary of police. I've also had situations that were severe enough that I did need to call them, and they didn't help me. So that is not really a thought that goes through my head when dealing with these situations, and I've learned how to take care of myself or utilize community resources for these situations. These all happened years ago, and it's pretty wild to look back on and remember how terrified I felt in these times, so there's my stories. I hope you all enjoyed.